The half-eaten plate of jollof rice was still warm when Neka lifted it from the conference room trash. And that was the exact moment Madame Chinyere chose to walk back in for her forgotten phone. For 3 long seconds, nobody breathed. Neka stood there in her faded gray cleaner's uniform, the loaf of bread in her left hand and the fork in her right, the rice already halfway to her mouth. And the most powerful woman on the 14th floor of Halcyon Towers stared at her the way one stares at something that has crawled where it was never meant to go. "Drop it," Madame Chinyere said. Her voice was quiet, which was worse than shouting. "Drop it right now, you filthy thing." Neka set the plate down on the long glass table where, 20 minutes earlier, 11 directors had picked at their catered lunch and left more than they ate. Her hand was shaking. She wiped her mouth with the back of her wrist and tried to say something, anything. But her throat had closed. Madame Chinyere walked the length of the room slowly, the heels of her cobalt blue shoes clicking against the polished floor. And she stopped close enough that Neka could smell her perfume, expensive and cold. "Do you know what this room costs to rent for 1 hour?" the older woman asked. "More than your village earns in a year, and you stand here eating from our garbage like an animal." There were 4 others in the doorway now. 2 junior managers, a tall man named Tunde from accounts, and a woman in a scarlet dress named Patience, who handled scheduling and never missed a chance to watch someone smaller than her be made smaller still. They were laughing already, behind their hands, their eyes bright with the particular joy people feel when the misfortune belongs to someone else. "Look at her," Patience said, pointing one long, manicured finger. She didn't even wait to take it home. She ate it standing in the room, in the boardroom. "They are like that," Madame Chinyere said, turning to her audience now, performing for them. "These ones. You feed them once, and they think the whole building is theirs." Neka picked up her cleaning trolley. The wheels squeaked. She did not answer, because she had learned a long time ago that answering only made it longer. She pushed the trolley past Patience, who stepped back exaggeratedly as if the cleaner carried a disease, and the laughter followed her all the way to the service elevator, where the doors finally closed and she was alone with the bucket and the mop and the ringing in her ears. What none of them knew, what not one soul in Halcyon Towers had ever suspected in the 11 months Neka had pushed a trolley down their corridors, was that the woman they had just called filthy owned the building they were standing in. She owned the company that signed every one of their paychecks. She owned the chair Madame Chinyere sat in, the desk Patience filed her nails behind, the very air conditioning that made this floor feel like a different country. Halcyon Holdings, the parent company that controlled Halcyon Towers and 4 other firms across Lagos and Abuja, had a sole majority shareholder, and her name was Neka Ego Adeyemi. And she scrubbed their toilets at night for the simple reason that she needed to know exactly who she had hired. But that reckoning was still 19 days away, and much would happen first. Neka had not always cleaned floors. She had inherited Halcyon from her father, Chief Adeyemi, a quiet, hard man who built the company from a single import shop into something with 500 employees and a glass tower with his name etched in the lobby marble. When he died, he left her 2 things. The first was the company. The second was a letter, sealed, which she kept folded in the inside pocket of her uniform every single day, and which she had read so many times, the creases had gone soft as cloth. The letter said this: "A company is not its buildings. It is the way the powerful treat the powerless when they believe no one important is watching. Before you ever sit in my chair, go and stand among them as nobody. See who is kind when there is nothing to gain. Promote those people, and only those people." The rest will smile at you and rob you blind. So she had walked into the HR office herself, in plain clothes, and taken a cleaner's job in her own building under a name that was almost, but not quite her own. Against the advice of every lawyer, every board member who knew the truth, she had pushed a trolley through her own kingdom for 11 months, watching, listening, learning the names of the people who would never have learned hers. She had 19 days left before the annual shareholders' gala, where she would finally take her father's chair in front of the entire company. 19 days. She told herself the number every morning when she pulled on the gray uniform. 19 days, then 18, then 17. The countdown was the only thing that kept her hands steady when the laughter came. She had come down to the boardroom that day for a reason that had nothing to do with hunger, though hunger had been real enough. Earlier that morning, she had been mopping the corridor outside the accounts office when she overheard two voices through a half-closed door. Madame Chiniere's and a man's, speaking low about a payment to a company Neka had never heard named. And then a small laugh. And then the door had clicked shut. It had meant nothing to her then. It was only a fragment, a freight company she could not place, a figure that sounded too large. But she had a memory that did not let go of numbers, a gift from her father, and the fragment stayed with her like a seed caught in cloth, waiting. When she went into the boardroom after the director's lunch and saw the wasted plates, she had told herself she was only hungry. She had not yet understood that she was being drawn, slowly, toward the very thing her father had sent her to find. The morning after the boardroom scene, the building knew. Of course it knew. Patience had told everyone, and the story had grown in the telling, the way these stories do. By the time it reached the ground floor, it was no longer a tired woman eating leftover rice. It was a thief. It was a mad woman. It was someone who had been caught stealing food and would surely be caught stealing worse. Neka heard two of the security guards talking about it as she filled her bucket at the basement tap. The cleaner, the one with the sad face, one of them said. Madame Chiniere wants her gone. She told Mr. Okonkwo in HR to find a reason. The water rose in the bucket. Neka watched it and said nothing. She knew Mr. Okonkwo. He was a heavy, kind-faced man in his 50s who ran the Human Resources Department, and he was, by her count, the third good person she had found in 11 months. The other two she had not found in any grand moment. She had found them both in the small hours when the building was almost empty and nobody was performing for anybody. The first was a security guard named Emeka. She had found him on the second week, a night when a delivery of office furniture came late and the day staff had gone home, and a single bin of packing waste, soaked through with rain, had to be dragged from the loading bay to the skip across the dark forecourt. She had taken one handle and braced herself to drag the whole sodden weight alone, her feet sliding on the wet concrete, when a big shadow detached itself from the guard post and took the other handle without asking permission. 2 people, 1 load, Emeka said simply, and they had carried it together. Later, he pulled a foil packet of rice and stew from his coat, broke it in half on the guard post counter, and slid her portion across. He asked her nothing about herself except whether she had a safe way home. He did this for whoever was on the night shift, the cooks, the cleaners, never the directors. Because the directors, he said once, had never gone hungry and did not need his half. The second was a young intern named Adeze. Neka had found her in a stairwell on the 9th floor at 8:30 one evening, folded over her own knees, crying so hard her shoulders shook. Neka had sat down on the cold concrete step beside her, and she had said nothing wise and nothing clever. She had only stayed. She had handed the girl a clean folded cloth from her trolley to wipe her face and waited until the crying slowed. Adeze? Neka said softly, after the worst of it had passed. What did she say to you? The girl wiped her face with the cloth and struggled to speak. She screamed at me, in front of everyone. A report was misfiled, and she told the whole department it was my fault. But I did not file it. It was not mine. And they all just watched. Neka looked at the girl's wet face in the fluorescent stairwell light. Those who watch and say nothing, she said, will also answer for it one day. The next morning, the intern had found her at the basement tap and pressed a small wrapped meat pie into her hand and asked shyly, "Ma, did you eat this morning? You are always thinking of everyone. Did anybody think of you?" A girl who had been screamed at and humiliated, with nothing in this building and no power at all. And her first thought the next day had been whether the cleaner had eaten. 3 good people in a building of 500 employees. Her father would have called that a poor harvest. She called it a beginning. She folded the thought away and pushed her trolley to the next floor, the wheels squeaking on the polished corridor. That afternoon, Neka was sent to clear the boardroom a second time. The directors had been hosting clients from a German firm, a long-catered lunch, and the clients were gone. And Neka entered with her trolley to find only the halcyon people remaining, in the mood that comes after good food and signed contracts, loose and loud and looking for entertainment. "Ah, here she is," Patience announced as Neka entered with her trolley. "The hungry one. Should we leave her something, out of charity?" "Leave her the whole tray," said Tunde from accounts, and the table laughed. Madame Chinyere did not laugh. She watched Neka with that cold, quiet attention, the way a cat studies something it has already decided to destroy. She picked up a plate that still held half a piece of grilled fish and a mound of rice, and she walked over to where Neka stood, and she held it out. "Here," she said, "since you like our leftovers so much, take it. Take it in front of everybody. Go on." The room went still in that hungry way. Neka looked at the plate. She looked at the woman holding it, and for one moment, something flickered behind her tired eyes. Something that, if Madame Chinyere had been a wiser woman, would have frightened her badly. "No, thank you, Ma," Neka said quietly. "I have eaten." "You have eaten?" Madame Chinyere's smile thinned. "From where? From whose bin? Take the plate. I am giving you a gift. Or are you too proud now? A cleaner. Too proud to take food?" "I am not too proud," Neka said. "I simply do not need it." The plate trembled in Madame Chinyere's hand. She had expected gratitude or groveling, and she had gotten neither, and the lack of it enraged her with a fury she could not have explained. She tilted the plate. The fish and the rice slid off and fell against the front of Neka's gray uniform and dropped to the floor between her shoes. And a sound went around the table, half gasp and half delighted laugh. "Now you can clean it," Madame Chinyere said. "That is your job, isn't it? Clean it up, on your knees, where you belong." Neka looked down at the food on her uniform, the orange grease soaking into the gray, and she felt the familiar heat climb her neck. 18 days, she told herself. 18 days. She knelt. She wiped the floor with the cloth from her trolley while the table watched and Patience filmed it on her phone. And she stood up and she pushed the trolley out without a word, and the laughter chased her once again into the service elevator. In the elevator, the young intern Adeyeze was there, holding a folder, her eyes wet on Neka's behalf. "Why do you let them?" Adeyeze whispered. "Why don't you say something? Report them?" "To who?" Neka asked gently. "To the owner. To Madame Adeyemi, the one who owns everything. They say she is coming to the gala. They say nobody has ever even seen her face. If she knew how they treat people here." "Maybe she will know one day," Neka said. The elevator doors opened. "What is your name again?" "Adaize, ma." "Adaize?" Neka smiled, very slightly. "Don't lose your kindness in this place. It is the most valuable thing you own, more valuable than anything else here." She did not yet know how true that would prove, or how soon. That night, after the offices emptied, Neka did what she did every night. She walked the dark corridors of her own company. She let herself into the records room with a key the day staff did not know she carried, and she sat at a desk under a single lamp and she read. Not gossip, numbers, invoices, expense reports. The boring paper trail where, her father had taught her, the truth of a company is always finely written. And on the third night of that final stretch, 15 days before the gala, she found something that made the leftover rice and the spilled fish shrink into nothing. It began with a single invoice that did not feel right. A fuel surcharge, of all the small, dull things in the world, billed against the transport account at a figure that was too round, too clean, a number that no real diesel bill ever produces. She pulled the file behind it. Behind the fuel surcharge was a delivery manifest, and the manifest named a logistics firm called Brightway Freight, and the name struck a small cold bell in her memory. Because Brightway was the name she had not been able to place through the half-closed account's door, the name that had been a seed in cloth for 2 weeks. She climbed the ladder one rung at a time, the way her father had taught her, never skipping. Because the truth in a company is always written between 2 boring pages that nobody troubles to read together. There was a contract, a supply contract with Brightway Freight, signed 8 months ago, renewed twice, for the transport of Halcyon's imported goods from the Lagos port to the warehouses. She laid it beside a freight rate sheet from a competing firm she found in the same cabinet, the 2 pages side by side under the single lamp. And the difference leapt off the paper at her. Brightway charged Halcyon nearly 3 times the going rate, and Halcyon paid it every month, without question. She turned to the authorizing page. The signature was a senior director's. She knew that looping, confident hand. She had seen it on a dozen memos pinned to the corridor notice boards she dusted every week. The senior director who had signed the contract, who had pushed it through the board, who renewed it twice, was Madame Chenier. That alone could have been mere incompetence. A bad deal, an overpaid friend. But Neka kept climbing. 4 more nights, 4 more rungs. She found the routing of the payments, then the bank that received them, then the account behind the bank, a shell company registered to an address that turned out to be a roadside provisions kiosk in Surulere. And then, on the 5th night, the name on the shell account itself, which belonged to the husband of Madame Cheniere's younger sister. The money left Halcyon as an honest freight bill and came back to Madame Cheniere's own household through 3 turns of paper, meant to hide the trail. It was not incompetence. It was theft, patient and practiced. And the quiet percentage it skimmed off her father's company was enormous. She had almost been caught on the 4th night. She was bent over the open cabinet at 1:30 in the morning, the photographs already taken, when the records room door opened and the lights snapped on and Patience stood in the doorway in her coat. Come back for a phone she had left charging at her desk down the hall, staring at the cleaner sitting where no cleaner had any business sitting. "What are you doing in here?" Patience demanded. "This room is locked. This room is always locked. How did you get a key?" Neka did not freeze. She had played this moment in her mind a dozen times. She rose slowly, picked up the cloth and the small bottle of polish she always kept in her apron precisely for this, and she gestured at the cabinet's brass handles. "Cleaning the fittings, Ma," she said, her voice gone small and dull again, the cleaner's voice. Mr. Okonkwo gave me the key to do the brass at night when the office is empty. The handles, the rails. I can leave if you want. Patience looked at the cloth, the polish, the dull, tired face, and her contempt did the work that contempt always does. It made her stupid. She could not imagine the cleaner as anything but a cleaner. The idea that this gray nobody might be reading the company's secrets was so far beneath her that her mind refused it entirely. "Disgusting," she said, wrinkling her nose. "They let you people wander everywhere. Lock it when you finish, and do not touch anything on the desks." She took her phone and left, and her heels clicked away down the corridor. And Neka stood alone in the bright room with her heart going like a drum and the photographs safe in her pocket. And she understood that the very thing they despised her for, her invisibility, was the strongest armor she owned. Neka sat back down, very still under the lamp. She was not a foolish woman, and she understood at once that she had stopped being merely a tired cleaner who got rice thrown at her. She was now a witness. She had found, in the boring paper, a theft of close to 200 million naira from her father's company. And the woman who had spilled fish on her uniform and made her kneel was the thief. She let herself feel the anger for a full minute, and then she folded it away, because anger was a luxury, and she had 15 days and a plan that was older than her anger. She photographed every page. She did not tell a soul. She locked the records room, pushed her trolley to the basement, and went home to the small flat she kept under her cleaner's name, where no driver and no maid and no marble lobby could find her. And she lay awake counting. 15 days. Then 14. The next morning, Madame Chinyere was in rare form. The whisper had reached her that the owner, the mysterious Madame Adeyemi, would indeed attend the gala in 2 weeks and would announce the year's promotions and dismissals personally. This terrified some people and delighted Madame Chinyere, who had spent 3 years and a great deal of false charm positioning herself to be named the new managing director. She believed the chair was hers. She believed it so completely that she had already ordered the nameplate. She found Neka mopping the executive corridor and could not resist. "You," she called. "Cleaner. When the owner comes, you will not be here. Do you understand me? Filth like you is not allowed in the same building as a woman like Madame Adeyemi. I have asked HR to remove you before the gala. Enjoy your last days." "Yes, Ma," Neka said and kept mopping. "Yes, Ma." Patience mimicked from down the hall, and the two of them laughed, and the sound rolled down the corridor, and then Neka mopped through it the way a riverbank absorbs the rain. But Madame Chinyere had made one mistake, and it was the mistake the proud always make. She had threatened the wrong person, and she had asked Mr. Okonkwo, the kind heavy man in HR, to be the instrument of it. And Mr. Okonkwo, who had watched the cleaner be humiliated twice and had said nothing because he was a careful man with 3 children and a mortgage, went home that night and could not sleep. It was in those same days that Neka first noticed the freight inspector. His name was Obinna, and he had been sent by Mr. Bassi, the auditor, quietly, to walk the warehouses and photograph the actual goods against the inflated manifests, building the second half of the case from the floor up. He was a tall, calm man of about 30, with a strong jaw and warm, dark eyes. And he wore a plain, off-white work shirt with the sleeves rolled and carried a clipboard. And the directors who passed him in the lobby read him exactly as he dressed. A low freight clerk, and looked through him exactly as they looked through Neka. She watched him from behind her trolley on his second morning. A director's wife had dropped her scarf on the marble lobby floor and swept on without noticing. And Patience, walking beside her, saw the freight clerk and snapped her fingers at him. You, pick that up. Bring it. And Obinna had bent, lifted the scarf, and brought it. And as he handed it over, he had also, quietly, stopped to help an old man on a cane who was struggling with the heavy glass door, holding it wide and patient until the old man was safely through. While Patience and the director's wife clicked away without a backward glance, Neka felt something turn over in her chest, watching him. Here was a man treated as nothing who used the moment to be kind to someone smaller still. She did not know yet who he would become to her. She only marked him the way she marked all the kind ones, and added him quietly to the harvest. The following afternoon, Mr. Okonkwo did something brave. He found Neka in the basement break room, eating a small home-packed lunch alone, and he sat down across from her, and he looked at his hands for a long moment before he raised his eyes. "I am not going to do it," he said. "I am not going to write the dismissal, whatever it costs me." Neka looked up at him. "It may cost you everything," she said. "She is very powerful in this company." "She is powerful," he agreed. "But I have watched her for years. I have signed papers I did not like because I was afraid. And I watched her make you kneel. And I find I am more afraid of being the man who does that than I am of losing this job." He laced his thick fingers together on the table. "My mother cleaned offices for 30 years so I could go to school. Every time I look at you, I see her. I cannot do it. I am sorry I did not refuse sooner." Neka reached across the table and put her hand over his. "Mr. Okonkwo," she said, "remember what you said to me today. Remember it exactly. There may come a day, very soon, when you are very glad you said it." He did not understand her. He patted her hand and went back upstairs. And Neka sat alone in the break room and took out her father's letter and read it again under the flickering fluorescent light. Promote those people, and only those people. She had now found her fourth. 13 days. Then 12. The building moved toward the gala, the way water moves toward a falls. Slow, and then suddenly fast. Decorators came. The grand banquet hall on the top floor was draped in gold and crimson. A red carpet was unrolled in the lobby. Patience spent 2 full afternoons choosing which of the director's wives she would sit near. And Madame Chinyere had her nameplate delivered, brushed brass, managing director, and she kept it in her drawer and took it out to look at when the office was empty. Neka kept cleaning. She moved through the preparations unseen, invisible to everyone now busy with their finery. And she watched the contractors, and she noted, with the patient attention of someone who had read a great many invoices, that even the gala itself was being skimmed. The catering bill was inflated. The decoration company was another shell. The same signature authorized them both. Madame Chinyere was not merely a thief. She was a thief who had grown so confident she no longer bothered to hide it, because she believed that in 2 weeks she would own the place and answer to no one. 10 days. Neka prepared. She sat in a small rented office 2 streets from the tower on the first night, a place no one from Halcyon would ever think to look. And she spread her photographs across the table under a bare bulb and looked at them one last time. The contract, the manifest, the shell account, the provisions kiosk address, each page was a rung, and together they made a ladder, and the ladder reached exactly as high as she needed it to go. The first man she met there was a lawyer her father had trusted for 30 years, a small, precise old man named Barrister Ease, who had drawn up Chief Adeyemi's will, and who was one of only 4 living people who knew that the owner of Halcyon had been scrubbing its floors. He spread her photographs across his desk, put on his glasses, and read for 40 minutes without a word. "This is not a complaint, my child," he said at last, taking off his glasses. This is a conviction. The signatures alone would be enough. The shell account is the rope around her own neck. He looked at her over the desk. Your father would have done exactly this. He would have made very sure first. And then he would have done it publicly, before everyone present, so that it could never be whispered away. The second was the auditor, a thin, nervous man named Mr. Bassi, who had worked at Halcyon 4 years earlier and had been pushed out. His reputation quietly poisoned after he flagged a freight contract he did not like. He had assumed for 4 years that he had simply made an enemy and lost. When Neka laid the Brightway file in front of him, he went very still, and then his hands began to shake. Not with fear, but with something closer to grief. I was right, he said softly. All this time. I told them the numbers were wrong, and they told me I was incompetent, and they took my name from me. I was right. Neka reached across and steadied his hands. You were right, she said. And you are coming back. There will be a chair waiting for you, and your name returned to you in front of the same people who took it. The third meeting was the hardest. He was a representative from the Economic and Financial Crimes Commission, the EFCC, a plain, careful man named Officer Danladi, and he listened to her for 2 hours without expression. And then he set down his pen and asked, very quietly, Madam, forgive me. Cleaners do not walk into my office with traced shell accounts and forensic photographs and a 30-year barrister at their side. Who are you, really? Neka had folded her hands on the table. My name is Neka Ego Adeyemi, she told him, and watched his face change. Chief Adeyemi was my father. I own the company. I have spent 11 months as a cleaner inside my own company, and I have brought you the woman who has been bleeding it. And I am going to need you at a party. 9 days, 8, 7. On the 7th night, Neka carried the original files back to the records room one last time, placing each folder exactly as she had found it, closing the cabinet's brass latch with the same soft click she had heard when she first opened it weeks before. And in the act of returning what was not hers to keep, she came upon something she had not been looking for. Tucked at the back of the oldest cabinet, in a folder marked only with a year-long past, was a photograph. It was her father, young, no older than 40, standing in shirt sleeves outside the very first Halcyon import shop. No glass tower, no marble, no chandeliers, only a small concrete storefront and a hand-painted sign. And beside him, half in the frame, was a woman in a cleaner's apron with a broom, a member of staff whose name no record kept. And her father had his hand on the broom woman's shoulder, and they were both laughing at something outside the picture. On the back, in his small, careful hand, he had written one line. The shop is clean because she is here. Treat her like the queen she is. Neka sat with the photograph under the lamp for a long time. She had carried his letter for 11 months and read it 100 times. And only now, on the 7th night, did she understand it was not a riddle her father had invented for her. He had lived it. He had known a broom woman's worth before anyone taught him. And he had built 500 jobs on that knowing. And he had sent his daughter into the gray uniform not to test her, but to give her the same eyes he had. She slipped the photograph into her apron beside the letter, the two of them together now. And she counted the days that remained, and for the first time in 11 months, the counting did not feel like endurance. It felt like an arrival. In those last days, the cruelty did not stop. If anything, it sharpened, because Madame Chinyere wanted Neka gone before the gala, and Mr. Okonkwo's quiet refusal had thwarted her. And a thwarted, proud woman is a dangerous thing. She tried to have Neka barred from the building by the security chief. And the security chief was Emeka, the first good man Neka had found. Neka was on the ground floor polishing the lobby handles when she heard the exchange at the guard desk, 3 meters away behind a column. Madame Chinyeri's voice first, low and precise, the voice she used when she expected obedience. "I want that cleaner, the one who has been given too much freedom, removed from the guest list and from the building before the gala. Today, if possible." Emeka's voice came back calm and level. "Which cleaner, ma?" "You know the one, the insolent one, the one who does not know her place." A brief silence. "All my cleaners know their place," Emeka said. "I am going to need her name in writing, and the reason also in writing. And that writing will need to go to the building owner's office. Those are the procedures. I am the senior director of this company," Madame Chinyere said, and her voice had sharpened now. "I am telling you, not requesting. Remove her. And I am telling you respectfully, ma, that I answer to the owner and not to any director who has not yet been confirmed. Bring me the dismissal in writing with your signature and the grounds. I will act on it the same day." Another silence. "I have always acted on proper paperwork, ma. Very promptly." There was a long pause. Then Madame Chinyere's heels clicked away across the marble without another word. And Eneka stood behind the column with her polishing cloth pressed to her chest and her eyes wet and her heart full of a gratitude she could not say aloud. She would not have to. She kept the gratitude folded inside her chest, the way she kept the letter, waiting for the day it could be paid. Madame Chinyere never put the request in writing. She never signed her name to the dismissal. And so Emeka's refusal held, quietly, like a cornerstone. 3 days before the gala, Madame Chinyere did the cruelest thing yet. It was the afternoon of the dress rehearsal. The grand hall was full, 50 or 60 staff arranging tables, the directors in their good clothes, practicing where they would stand. Neka moved through them on her knees at the edge of the room, polishing the brass rail of the stage, the very stage where, in 72 hours, the owner would stand to address the company. Madame Chinyere swept in wearing a sample of the gown she had ordered for the gala, scarlet and gold. And she saw the cleaner on her knees near the stage, and something in her could not bear it. "Get away from there," she said loudly, so the whole hall turned. "Who let this creature near the owner's stage? Get up, get up." And when Neka rose, Madame Chinyere snatched a glass of red wine from a passing rehearsal tray, and with a small, tight smile, poured it down the front of Neka's gray uniform. The hall gasped. The red spread across the gray like a wound. "There," Madame Chinyere said. "Now you match the carpet. Go home and do not come back. You are not fit to breathe the same air as Madame Adeyemi. She is a great woman, a woman of class, and when she comes, she will see this building swept clean of vermin like you. Get out." Neka stood very still while the wine dripped from the hem of her uniform onto the polished floor. The whole hall watched. Patience was filming again. Mr. Okonkwo, near the back, had gone pale and started forward. And Eneka caught his eye across the room and gave the smallest shake of her head. And he stopped. And then Neka did something she had not done in 11 months. She smiled, not bitterly, not in defeat. She smiled the small, certain smile of a person who is holding a winning hand and has only to wait 3 more days to lay it down. "Yes, ma," she said. "Madame Adeyemi will see this building exactly as it is. I promise you that." She bent, picked up her cloth, wiped the few drops of wine from the polished floor so that no one would slip, and walked out of the grand hall with the red stain blooming across her chest. Behind her, the laughter rose, but it was not quite as loud as before. Something in the way the cleaner had said that sentence had put a small cold finger on the back of more than one neck. 3 days, then 2, then 1. On the night before the gala, Neka did not sleep. She sat in her small flat with her father's letter open on the table and the folder of photographs beside it. The contract, the shell account, the inflated bills, the traced money, and a single sheet of paper on which she had written in her own hand 4 names: Emeka, Ades, Mr. Okonkwo, and the auditor whom Madame Chinyere had driven out for asking questions, whom Neka had found again and was about to bring back. 4 good people in a building of 500. She looked at the 4 names for a long time. Then she pressed her father's letter to her lips and folded it away one last time. And she said aloud to the empty room, "One day, Papa. 1 day left." The gala began at 7 in the evening, and by 6:30 the grand hall on the top floor of Halcyon Towers was a vision of gold and crimson. 500 guests, the directors and their wives, the senior staff, partners and clients, a string quartet, waiters gliding with trays of small expensive things. Madame Chinyere arrived in her scarlet and gold gown, and she was magnificent, and she knew it. And she moved through the hall accepting congratulations she had not yet earned, because everyone believed she would be named managing director within the hour. Patience trailed her in red. Tunda from accounts laughed too loudly at her jokes. The nameplate, brushed brass, managing director, was already wrapped in tissue in her clutch, waiting. At 7 exactly, the lights dimmed, and the master of ceremonies took the stage and welcomed the company, and said the words everyone had been waiting for. And now, for the first time in the history of Halcyon, in person, the woman to whom we all owe our livelihoods, the sole owner of Halcyon Holdings, the daughter of our beloved founder, Chief Adeyemi. Ladies and gentlemen, please rise for Madame Nkego Adeyemi. 500 people rose and turned toward the great gold doors at the back of the hall, where surely some grand stranger would now appear. The doors did not open. Instead, at the side of the hall, near the service entrance the staff used, a single figure stepped out of the shadows and began to walk toward the stage. And at first, no one understood, because the figure wore a plain gray cleaner's uniform with a faint red stain across the chest, and a few people laughed nervously, thinking it a joke, thinking the cleaner had wandered in by accident again. Madame Chinyere's face, near the front, went the color of ash, because she knew that face. She had poured wine down that uniform 3 days ago. She had spilled fish on it. She had stood over it and commanded it to kneel. And now that same face was walking, calm and unhurried, up the steps of the stage she had been forbidden to touch. And the master of ceremonies was bowing to her, actually bowing and handing her the microphone. Neka stood at the center of the stage in her gray uniform with the red stain, and she looked out over 500 people, and she let the silence stretch until it was unbearable. "My name is Nkego Adeyemi," she said. Her voice, no longer quiet and frightened but clear and steady, filled the hall. "Most of you have addressed me by another name these last 11 months, the cleaner, the hungry one. Some of you," and here her eyes found Madame Chinyere in the front row, "have called me worse." The hall did not breathe. "My father built this company from nothing," Neka went on. "And before he died, he gave me one instruction. He told me that a company is not its buildings and not its profits. It is the people in it. So I came here as nobody. I pushed a trolley through your corridors for 11 months. I cleaned your offices and your boardrooms. I emptied your bins. And I watched. I watched all of you. And I learned exactly who you are. A murmur ran through the crowd. Several faces had gone very pale. Patience had begun, slowly, to back toward the wall. Some of you were kind to a cleaner who could do nothing for you, Neka said, and her voice softened. Emeka, my head of security, who refused to use his uniform against the weak. Stand up, Emeka. The big man rose, stunned, and a ripple of applause went through the staff at the back, the cleaners and the guards and the cooks, who understood before anyone else what they were watching. Adaeze, an intern who asked whether a stranger had eaten. Stand up, my dear. The girl rose, shaking. And Mr. Okonkwo, who was asked to throw me out of this building and who refused, knowing it might cost him everything. Stand up, sir. Mr. Okonkwo rose with tears running openly down his face, and Neka looked at him and said gently into the microphone, so that the whole hall heard it. I told you that one day you would be glad you refused. Today is that day. You are the new managing director of Halcyon Holdings. The hall erupted. The staff at the back were on their feet, clapping, some of them weeping, and the directors in the front rows were frozen, and in the very front, in scarlet and gold, Madame Chinyere stood rooted to the floor with the brass nameplate growing heavy in her clutch. Neka raised one hand, and the hall fell silent again. And now, she said, we come to the other matter. She nodded toward the side of the room, and 3 people who had been waiting there stepped forward into the light. The lawyer, the auditor Madame Chinyere had driven out, returned now in a good suit, and a third man, plain-faced, who held up a badge that caught the chandelier light, and whose presence made several people in the hall sit down very suddenly. This is an officer of the Economic and Financial Crimes Commission, Neka said. Over the past 11 months, while I was cleaning the offices of the directors who laughed at me, I was also reading their files. And I found, Madame Chinyere, that you have stolen from my father's company. Brightway Freight, the catering shell, the decoration shell, close to 200 million naira routed through an account in your sister's husband's name. I have every page. I have every signature. They are yours. Madame Chinyere found her voice at last, and it came out cracked. That is a lie, she said. That is a filthy... She stopped because the word she had used so easily for 11 months would not come out now in front of 500 people who had just watched the cleaner become the queen. Say it, Neka said quietly. You have said it to my face 3 times in this building. Say it now, before this company and this officer. What am I? Madame Chinyere's mouth opened and closed. 500 faces had turned to her, and not one of them was laughing, and the silence where her cruelty used to live was the loneliest sound in the world. Those documents are forged, she tried, lifting her chin, reaching for the old confidence, and finding it had gone out from under her. Anyone can print papers. You have invented this because I tried to have a cleaner dismissed. That is all this is. A cleaner's revenge. The board will see through it. The board knows me. The board signed nothing, Neka said. You signed everything. Brightway Freight, 8 months, renewed twice, 3 times the going rate. The fuel surcharge that was too round to be real. The account in Surulere registered to your sister's husband at the address of a provisions kiosk. The catering shell for this very gala. Shall I read the dates aloud? I have them by heart, everyone. She did not raise her voice once. You called me filthy for eating from a bin, and all the while you were eating from this company. Shall I tell everyone exactly how much? I have had 4 nights with each page, and Officer Danladi has spent 3 days confirming every line. You cannot do this to me, Madame Cinieri said. And now her voice broke entirely, and the scarlet gown that had been a coronation an hour ago hung on her like a confession. I have given this company 3 years. The managing director chair is mine. I earned it. You ordered the nameplate, Neka said. I know. I dust your drawer. A low sound moved through the hall, not quite a laugh, something graver. The chair was never yours. It was my father's. And he left exactly one instruction about who may sit in it, and you have failed it more completely than anyone I have watched across 11 months. She turned finally to Officer Danladi. She is the one in the scarlet gown. What happened then was not loud, and that was the terrible thing about it. The officer simply walked across the gold and crimson hall, through the parting crowd, to where Madame Cinieri stood, and he said a few quiet words, and he took her gently but very firmly by the arm. The brass nameplate slipped from her clutch and fell to the polished floor with a flat ringing sound, managing director face up, and no one bent to pick it up. Patience had already vanished. Tunda from accounts was staring at his shoes. And Madame Cinieri, who had poured wine down a cleaner's uniform and commanded her to kneel 3 days ago, was walked out of the grand hall she had been certain she would rule, past 500 silent guests, weeping in a gown the color of the wine she had spilled. The doors closed behind her. For a moment, no one moved. Then Neka spoke again, and her voice had gentled completely now, the steel folded away. I did not do this for revenge, she said. I did it because my father asked me to find the kind ones and lift them up, and to let the proud ones fall by the weight of their own pride. They mocked a cleaner who ate their leftovers. They never once asked why she was hungry, or whether she was tired, or what her name was. The kindness that costs you nothing, the kindness you show when there is nothing to gain, is the only true measure of a person. God lifts the humble, and he exposes the proud in their own time. Tonight, you have all seen it with your own eyes. She looked out over the hall, over the weeping staff and the ashamed directors, and her tired face broke at last into a wide and genuine smile. Now, she said, Mr. Okonkwo and I have a great deal of work to do. There will be raises for everyone in this building who never had power and never once abused the little they had. There will be questions for those who did. But that is for tomorrow. Tonight, please, eat. Eat well. And nobody, she added, and a soft, warm laugh moved through the room, the first laughter of the night that was not cruel. Nobody throws away the leftovers. Pack them for the night staff, every plate. That night, when the gala had ended and the guests had gone and the great hall stood empty under its dimmed gold lights, Neka did not leave with the directors. She changed, quietly, in a back room, and she came out not in a sequin gown, but in a plain dress, and she went down to the basement break room where the night staff gathered, the cooks and the guards and the 2 other cleaners, the people who had clapped first because they had understood first. They fell silent when she entered, unsure now how to be around her. So she picked up a stack of clean takeaway containers from the catering leftovers, the good food, the untouched trays, and she began to pack them herself, the owner of the company on her feet among them, filling box after box for them to carry home to their families. Emeka tried to take the work from her hands, and she would not let him. 2 people, 1 load, she said. And the big man's eyes filled, because they were his own words come back to him. And they packed the leftovers together the way they had once dragged a sodden bin across a dark forecourt, side by side as equals. the way it should always have been. 3 months later, the Grand Hall of Halcyon Towers held a gathering of a different order entirely. It was a wedding. Neka stood at the top of the gold staircase in a gown of deep crimson sequins that caught the light like 1,000 small fires, coral beads at her throat and gold at her wrists. And she descended slowly while 500 guests rose to their feet. And this time there was no gray uniform and no red stain. Only the daughter of Chief Adeyemi in her full glory. But her face had not changed. It was the same kind, tired face that had knelt to wipe wine from a floor, only rested now, and lit from within. The man waiting for her at the foot of the staircase was the freight inspector, Obinna, the quiet, gentle man she had first marked from behind her trolley as he held a glass door open for an old man on a cane, while the proud swept past without stopping. In the weeks after the gala, he had stayed on to help Mr. Bassi untangle the last of the stolen contracts, and he had come to know the owner as a person and not as a title. And he had fallen in love with her plain warmth long before he fully understood that the warm woman he was falling for and the cleaner the whole building had once mocked were one and the same. When at last he understood it, he had loved her no less. He had loved her more because he had seen what she had endured in silence to keep her father's word. He wore a deep red Asiagu and a chief's coral cap now, and he was looking up at her as if she were the only person who had ever existed. In the front row sat Mr. Okonkwo, the managing director now, beside his wife and 3 children. Beside him sat Emeka in a good suit, and Adesi, who was no longer an intern, but the head of a new department Neka had created, a small office whose entire job was to listen to the people in the building who had no power, and to make sure that no one ever again went hungry or unheard in Chief Adeyemi's company. Mr. Bassi sat near them, restored to his chair and his name. 4 good people, all of them lifted, exactly as the letter had asked, and in the inside pocket of her crimson gown, where 11 months of gray uniforms had carried it before. Neka still kept her father's letter, folded soft as cloth. She did not need to read it anymore. She had become it. As the priest spoke the old words and Obinna took her hand, Neka looked out one more time over the gathered company, over the cooks and the cleaners and the guards seated now among the directors, no head higher than another. And she thought of the half-eaten plate of jollof rice still warm in the boardroom trash, and the woman who had called her filthy for eating it. And she felt no anger at all, only a deep and settled peace. She had counted down the days alone, in a gray uniform, with rice on her chest and wine on her skin and laughter in her ears. And every single day, the falling number had been carrying her here. So tell me, wherever in the world you are watching from tonight, whether it is Lagos or London or Atlanta or some small town whose name I will never know, leave it in the comments and let me see your faces. Tell me this. When you meet someone the world has decided is nobody, the cleaner, the beggar, the tired one eating from a plate that was meant for the bin, what do? Do you point and laugh with the crowd? Or do you ask them their name? Because you never know, my friend. You never, ever know who is wearing the gray uniform. And God is always, always watching to see what you will do. Team Neka. Say it with me in the comments below. And remember, kindness costs you nothing, but it may one day be worth everything you have.